Welcome back to the OPEX podcast. On today's episode, I'm speaking to Mike T. Nelson. Mike has previously been on the podcast where we spoke about metabolic flexibility. On today's show, Mike and I discuss all things CBD. Guys, this was a great conversation with Mike, and I hope you really, really enjoy it. Mike T. Nelson, you legend. Thank you so much for coming back onto this podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for having me back on the podcast. I appreciate it. Nice to see your smiling face again.
Two topics I really wanted to talk about were CBD oil, the research around that, and in terms of performance recovery. And if we have time, just touch on your research around HRV and what you've discovered there. But just speak a little bit more about your travels, because you done a wicked amount of traveling. You weren't only just in Finland. You were in Iceland too. Did you go to Denmark? You were in a few bits of Scandinavia.
Yeah, so in August, we went over for a grip competition in Finland just to hang out and compete. Funny story on that, my good buddy Adam Glass is competing there. So we hung out with him at the Arnold in March, and a huge grip competitor, Arto from Finland, was there. Just massive hands. Like, he was going around looking. He's like, and all these other people here who are non-competitors, he's like pointing to their thumb muscle. He's like, they got no muscle. There's no muscle on their thumb. And he points to his buddy and him, and he goes, look, this is muscle. And it looks like a chicken wing got put into their hand. It's just huge. So we told Adam, he's like, hey, come over and compete in my grip competition I have in Finland. So Adam decided to do that instead of the World Championships in Russia. And he's like, well, you guys should come over too. And Adam's like, oh, Mike's done 10 grip competitions when I was in Minnesota. And Arto's like, oh, really? I said, yeah, we'll come over and watch, Adam compete. Arto's like, no, you should come too and compete. I'm like, but you need like a special invite to, compete at this, because there's people from all over the world that are, competing at a high level. And he's like, yes, I run competition. I give you special invite. You come and compete. So I'm like, okay. So my wife and I went over there and did the grip competition in Finland. Came back for a couple of weeks, and then I was teaching for the Carrick Institute in Sweden in the first part of September at Helsingborg, OPEX Fitness by Tobias, who runs that. So I flew over to Iceland. Since I was on Icelandair, I could stop in Iceland for free on the flight. So hung out there for a day, flew to Copenhagen, was there for a few days, went to Helsingborg, Sweden, taught, and then flew back from there, and then was in Dallas one weekend, Tahoe one weekend, and did the Carrick pain reset course on Gate this past weekend. So
where was the Carrick course?
Crazy. Luckily, it was in Minnesota, so that was super nice. I actually didn't have to go somewhere this past weekend.
And tell me this: how do you cope with all that travel? In terms of what strategies do you put in place? Do you do anything specific, or do you just go, listen, no matter what I'm doing, I'm going to be fucked, so I'm just going to go for it?
Yeah, so going to Europe is a little bit harder, I would say. So on the way over, I had everything kind of planned out. I unfortunately don't sleep well on flights. Like, if I don't even really sleep. So I just figured, all right, I'm going to be screwed. I'm going to fly over at night. I'm going to get to Iceland in the morning, and I'm going to take a bus. Went out to one of the hot springs they had there, the Blue Lagoon, which is amazing. And then they have literally, what is it, World Fitness, I think? I might have got the name wrong, but literally like one of the biggest gyms like in all of Europe.
Seeing the picture you put up, it looked huge.
Oh my God, it was like amazing. So I'm like, I'm just going to drink caffeine and go there and lift for an hour and a half and just screw around. Went back, got something to eat, and then I'm just going to go to bed super early. So I try to adjust myself as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And I made it through that day not too bad. The other caveat is I try not to go into it with any type of sleep debt. Because if I have a big sleep debt going into it, everything just sucks really bad. And then the next day wasn't too bad. The next day, if I don't get enough sleep that night, is a little bit hard. But the next 2 days, just, do a little lighter, get up, do the same routine in the morning, go for a walk, do some meditation, do some movement. Place I stayed had a rower, so I did some rowing in the morning. And it's not too bad then, as long as the next couple days are nothing crazy strenuous. So I did that on purpose. So I had like 3 days to acclimate before I had to teach. So that was nice. Coming back was a little harder, because coming back, you have like the world's longest day ever, because I had to leave over there. I had a layover in Iceland, and I left there at 2 p.m, and I think I got home at 4 p.m. my time. So you have like the world's longest day, and then I just try to go to bed early that night if I can, and then just let myself sleep as long as I can the next day, and then try to just get back doing the same routine again. Sometimes I will take melatonin when I try to adjust. I'll take, 3 to 9 milligrams sometimes. I played around with using small amounts beforehand, trying to shift my schedule earlier and all that stuff. And I can't say I noticed any huge difference, to be honest. So I just
what about light,
suck it up
Mike?
for a day.
What about light? Do you wear any like blue blockers or try and cover up your skin? Like,
yeah, so I do the same thing.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say in the morning I try to get sunlight. I have something called a human charger that puts light into your ear holes, basically. That
who doesn't does seem to. Who makes? Sorry to interrupt. Who makes those?
It's a Finnish company, Valky.
I've heard about those.
Yeah, and there's some pretty interesting data on it. From what I can tell, it doesn't appear to reset circadian rhythm, but does appear to help with being awake. So I'll use that once I get over trying to accumulate during the day a little bit, use a little bit more coffee. I do use blue blocking glasses in the evening, and those seem to help quite a bit. So I usually bring those with also. So I find light is probably the biggest thing to try to reset circadian rhythms, light and routine.
Yeah.
That's what I find. I got that from Dan Party.
Yeah, well, I know when I went to Indianapolis last year, over to IFAS Bill Hartman, that's what I found. That's what I found were the two, the two biggest regulators were my light exposure, so getting up with the AM sunlight, and then regulating my meals, as a circadian regulator. So, and I'd say I had no jet lag going over and no jet lag coming home, because I really was dialed in on my light exposure and timing my meals. So that's what I find works for me. But then just obviously, going from America to Europe, there's that's a lot of time zones crossed. Dallas is on the same time zone as you, is it, in Minnesota Central? And then how do you find Tahoe? Then is that California, is it?
Tahoe was 2-hour difference.
Yeah.
So with those, it just depends how long I'm going to be there and how much control over my schedule I have.
Yeah.
Everything got kind of hosed up before I left, so I only slept 3 hours before I had to get on a plane. So that made everything a little bit harder the next couple of days. But everything goes well. Sometimes I don't even change my time.
Yeah.
I leave my computer clock the same.
Yeah.
And so I'll get up super early sometimes and then just do my morning routine, do some work in the morning, and then go to teach or whatever training at 8 or 9, and then just kind of stay on the same routine and not even worry about those 2 hours. The downside is, depending on what direction you're going, then you're sometimes like the weirdo that's going to bed at like 8 o'clock at night. So I'm like, I'm going to bed now. So sometimes it doesn't always work out.
I know. But Kabir, all that said, listen, I appreciate you hopping on today, because you've done so much over the last few weeks, and obviously that can take a toll on your body, and then you want some downtime and you want to get back into routine, and you want to spend some time obviously with your loved ones. So I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
CBD. I know very little about CBD. I know it's been it's kind of been a big thing lately within the sports performance world. More so from the little bit I do know, more so because of its recovery benefits, more so than anything to do with performance. So I want to bring you on, and obviously there's always a bit of a selfish reason for the podcast host, but obviously then for the education benefit of the listeners. So Mike, tell us exactly give us the 101 on CBD, its history, what is it, where it comes from, what are the proposed benefits of it, and what your research has sort of concluded so far.
Yeah, so how I kind of got into CBD was about almost 3.5 years ago now. So as people probably know, I do a lot of kiteboarding. So just think about having a wakeboard type, surfy board type thing attached to your feet. You've got a harness and you've got 100 feet of line that go up to what looks like a upside down parachute looking thing. And if you do it right, you can, glide around on the water. And if you do it even better, you can basically pull this canopy really fast directly above you at speed, and it'll literally pull you up off the water. So you can kind of, fly through the air and do that kind of stuff. So I was thinking, when I was looking at it, I'm like, well, what happens if I'm 20 feet up and just get, screw up and get dropped out of the sky on my head? And I'm like, oh, that's not good. So I'm like, is there anything I should do beforehand? Prophylactically, if I'm going to choose to do this, crazy sport, which is super fun. And I started looking at the literature for, stuff like neck training, just some general training, things of that nature. And then for nutrition. And you find stuff like, there's some pretty good data on creatine. There's some interesting mouse models out of Canada where they thwacked the mice on the head and loaded them with creatine and saw less, brain damage. So I'll take personally 10 to 20 grams a day of creatine before I do a trip, just to maybe try to saturate brain levels. Trying to get a direct measure in humans with that, even using MRS, is really hard. So we don't have a lot of direct data on that per se. But creatine's been well studied. There's not much of a downside. I'm not worried about negative effects per se. I do carry a little bit of, I had one around here, ketone ester. My thought being, if I get whacked on the skull, I'm probably going to fast, and I'm going to take a ketone ester to put myself into ketosis as fast as possible. And I have tested that. I can usually get to around 3 millimolar within 20 to 30 minutes. The downside is the esters taste pretty bad, even the ones they reformulated. So I use the HVMN ones. They do work really well. So they'll skyrocket ketone levels. We've tested this on a whole bunch of people in the Carrick course that I teach. The downside is they're expensive. They're like $35 a bottle right now. So I view that for me as just a temporary thing. And then I just transition into doing a ketogenic type diet. And when I'm looking through all this research, I kept seeing stuff on, even THC and CBD. And I'm like, what? That's marijuana? What this, like, I grew up and I'm like, this is horrible. Like, you do anything like that, you're going to, meld with your couch cushion. Your life's going to go to hell. Like, you're never going to get out of the house. And I kept looking and seeing more and more research on it. And I was like, I'm like, well, what is the mechanism? Like, how does it work? And so I kept, going down that rabbit hole. And about 2.5 years ago, right as I'm doing this, about a year into it, a buddy of mine calls me up. He's like, hey, I saw you're going to Colorado. I said, yeah, I'm going to be out there for a couple of days. And he's like, well, interesting enough, I was out there and toured a facility that makes CBD, and it was super interesting. I was like, really? I was like, wow, I've been like looking at this for about a year now. He's like, oh, I'll put you in touch with them. You can go hang out with them, do the tour. And so I spent, 2 days with the guys at Charlotte's Web, signed an NDA, got the tour and everything like that. And I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. Fast forward, about, it's probably almost a year ago now, I sort of popped my head up out of all the research world, and like overnight CBD was like everywhere. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What the hell happened? Like in the US, it was literally like almost overnight CBD was everywhere. And the downside now is that CBD has all the hallmarks of everything that kind of matches what snake oil is, right? You can find it everywhere. I saw it at the freaking gas station the other day. Nobody knows what the quality is. A lot of the claims that are being made are completely overblown. And so now the backlash is, oh, it's just completely worthless. It's just all snake oil. And the reality, like most things, it depends what you're trying to do. And the truth is like somewhere in the middle, right? There actually is some very good data for certain aspects of CBD. Most of the claims have been obviously completely overblown. I would say most of the quality of CBD on the market is shit, because I know about what the raws cost and how much time and effort you need to put into the correct manufacturing process and everything that goes into it. So most companies now look and go, hey, wait a minute, we can sell this at a pretty high price point. The COPS, or what's called cost of products sold. So how much does it physically cost us in materials or raws to put into the product? And the reality is it's really not that much. Most of the cost is getting, where do you get the source? How do you test it? How do you know it's the same genetic material? How do you know there's actually CBD in it? Like all these other things that go into it. But if you're an unscrupulous manufacturer, you're like, oh, screw it. We don't care about any of that stuff. Let's just put some weed in a container and we'll just sell it for a high profit margin. All right. There's some older studies that have been peer reviewed already showing that the THC amount can vary. So if we back up and go, what actually is CBD versus THC? Right, so you have the cannabis plant, marijuana, whatever word you want to associate with it. And in the US, as of the Farm Bill Act a little while ago, if you have less than 0.3% THC in a hemp or cannabis leaf, it is then regulated under the Department of Agriculture. It's not considered a drug. It's not under the DEA. It's not under the FDA per se, unless it's talked about as a supplement, which the FDA does regulate to some degree. Enforcement, whole different issue. So it's illegal then now to sell it as a supplement, even in states where, cannabis, marijuana is illegal. So that's part of what I think part of the boom was. So CBD is a non-psychoactive component to cannabis. When you talk to the guys like at Charlotte's Web, the cannabis that they use is called Charlotte's Web. It's a very specific strain, and they want to maintain the exact same genetic ID of that. So they actually will cut the plant and plant them all by hand, right? So they're taking the same plant material all the time. They're not allowing pollination or anything else because they want that exact same genetic strain for everything because they can control that amount. And it turns out that that particular strain used to be called like the hippies' disappointment. As people would grow it and they'd smoke it and they're like, this shit's horrible, like nothing happened, I'm not stoned at all, right? And they thought, this is a worthless ditchweed. And then later they realized that, oh, wow, this particular strain has very, very high CBD, so non-psychoactive component, but very, very low THC. So if you look, because cannabis in the US has been illegal, if you're, let's say, going to grow cannabis and sell it to, facilitate buying a new house or a fancy car illegally, you would want the highest percentage THC, right? Because if you're going to get busted, it's by per weight. So if I can get something from like, a couple decades ago, 3, 4, 5% was considered pretty strong. Now they've got stuff in the 20%. Massive, massive increase. That's through different types of genetic breeding, things of that nature. But the incentive was, because it's illegal, you want the highest potency product. And technically, if you get busted, it's by weight anyway. They don't give a shit if it's like 5% or 20%, right? So you're thinking like, oh, wait a minute. If I can get it to 20%, I could sell less or sell more because it's more desirable product. And if something happens to me, the fees are going to be around the same. So the trend, because it's been made illegal, is super high THC. But CBD was then kind of pushed out. Now it's kind of reversing. So now if you have like Charlotte's Web, if you have a strain that's very high in CBD, that's actually a lot more coveted because of that. So the other difference is that CBD, now being sold as a supplement in all states in the US, may have some beneficial effects with neuronal health, possibly exercise recovery, which we'll talk about, and different, I would say, beneficial things in the body. The other kind of thing that I look at and go, okay, well, wait a minute. It's like you look at the claims for CBD, it's like, oh, it can help your sleep. Oh, it can help pain. Oh, it can help recovery. You go down the laundry list and you're like, that just seems almost too good to be true, right? The first thing I look at is, okay, what system is it supposedly regulated in the body, which would be the endocannabinoid system. And then I go, what I learned about the endocannabinoid system in college? Jack shit. I didn't learn anything about it. Like nobody ever even mentioned it. Like talk to most MDs and you're like, hey, what'd you learn about the endocannabinoid system? They're like nothing. It just seems to be the system that's just entirely skipped over, probably because there's a lot of unknowns. But quick primer on it. If you look at it, it actually does have the ability to regulate pain. It is involved with sleep. It's involved with many, many different physiologic systems in the body. So if CBD, THC does interact with the endocannabinoid system, at least there's a potential, the story makes sense that it could have, kind of these pluripotent or multiple effects across the body. So that kind of checks out. Like, okay. So the next question, then, does CBD actually interact with the endocannabinoid system? Yeah, kind of. It's not what they call a direct agonist of the endocannabinoid system. So like caffeine, right? So caffeine interacts directly with the adenosine receptor. That's pretty well known. The endocannabinoid system is a little bit weird in that it's almost like a local effect. It's like this weird hybrid branch that's kind of like the nervous system, but not really like a hormonal system, right? It's not like epinephrine gets released, from the adrenals and flows around and does all this different shit in the body. Endocannabinoid system's almost more like a semi-direct connection, more like the nervous system. And what are the top mechanisms that the endocannabinoid system regulates the body? So there's a CB1, cannabinoid receptor 1, the CB2, cannabinoid receptor 2. Those are the only two that tend to get talked about. However, there's something called TRVP1 and there's also a G-coupled protein. So there's at least 4, maybe even 5 mechanisms how the endocannabinoid system works. So it turns out that CBD doesn't really interact with any of those. It may interact with the G-coupled protein. It may have some TRVP1 effects. It's a very, very slight agonist of the cannabinoid receptors. It does things to kind of tweak different levels of THC. So if THC is present, even in small amounts, it changes the effect of CBD a little bit. So it's not this nice, simple story of I push a button and X happens. All right. It is regulating that system, but it's not this like direct effect that we're used to thinking about. And the last part on this, and you can actually ask a question. So I've been scratching my head like, okay, how the hell do I explain any of this? Because the simple story I wanted so bad to be true was, oh, a CB1 receptor is only found in this part of the tissue, and a CB2 is only part in the body effects, and CBD only acts with a CB2 receptor, so you get all the nice body effects, but you don't get any psychoactive effects, and THC only interacts with the CB1 receptor, which is only a neuronal tissue, which explains why it's psychoactive, and it's probably not true. It's kind of true a little bit, but it's just not that direct, nice, simple story. Because in the literature, when you have THC present and CBD, you get different effects than CBD only. So if you talk to manufacturers and they say, hey, the rule is 0.3% THC is legal to sell as a supplement, way, way, way below the effective dose. You won't feel anything from it. But they'll actually go as high as they can up to that amount, and it's still legal. And that's because they find that the effects are actually a little bit better. So even having that small amount of THC appears to kind of make the effects of CBD a little bit better.
So what are the effects of CBD?
So things that I think CBD could be useful for. Sleep is usually the first question people get questions about. And I would say maybe. So I've done a bunch of NO1 testing, and if you look at the literature first, most of the research has been looking at for sleep disorders. And we do know the endocannabinoid system is involved in regulation of sleep patterns. So it does kind of fit with that story. The research is really, really split on sleep. Sometimes maybe yes, sometimes maybe no. But vast majority of it is all done in people who have sleep disorders. And most people are asking like, hey, bro, if I'm training really hard and I take CBD, does like my deep sleep go up? Yeah, maybe. What I've seen just using like the Oura Ring, which again, about 70% accurate for, sleep staging of cycles. 40 to 60 milligrams may help deep sleep a little bit, but I think that has to be something you take most days to see the effect. And I would say the effect, if it's there, is very small. Like I still find light, possibly meal timing, exercise, caffeine, all those things are much, 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 much higher on the spectrum in terms of sleep. I have tested I've gone up to 300 milligrams for a couple days in a row. And interestingly enough, I felt a little funky from that. And there was a study I found just the other day that says that maybe super high doses of CBD, this is an animal model of simulated digestion, may paradoxically convert to THC in the gut, which was brand new. But they were looking at doses of like 600 milligrams in a simulated stomach. So who knows what that actually means in English. Most of the common CBD doses right now are like 20 milligrams is even on the higher side. The highest concentration you can get in the US that I've seen is per serving 60 milligrams. And even that is pretty expensive. So when I was testing like 300 milligrams a day, the only other big benefit I saw, which wasn't a benefit, was actually a downside, was just money streaming out of my wallet like really fast, because that was probably like $10 a day just to do that. So I'd say for sleep, maybe. There's good data with anxiety. So if you think about, I'll ask you, like, what do you think for most people is like the number one most anxiety producing thing that they could be asked to do?
Speak publicly.
Exactly. Bingo. You got it. Public speaking, right? And they've done like 4 studies on that now, and a pretty high dose of CBD, maybe 100 up to 300 milligrams or more before public speaking actually did help anxiety. So there's some data with anxiety. And I find anecdotally, if people are very anxious and that's why they can't sleep, CBD tends to be more beneficial in that population. Now, again, that may not be even regulating sleep per se, toning down some of their anxiety to then paradoxically allow them to sleep better. So we don't know if it's doing something else or if it's having a direct effect on that. In terms of exercise recovery, there's one super old study looking at, I think it was growth hormone and cortisol and stuff that pretty much everybody interprets wrong. And I actually pulled the scanned copy of the full study, and I don't think it's anything to write home about. I don't think you're going to alter any of your hormone levels by using CBD. I just don't think it's that useful for that. And even then, right? So something the other day we've seen, like David West has done the study with exercise, short-lived bouts of increased testosterone from Stu Phillips' lab. Doesn't do anything for hypertrophy. That study has been replicated a few times now. Physiologic changes in growth hormone, maybe, but other hormone levels probably don't have as big of an effect. Obviously, if you're super low, yes, you're going to see a difference. If you're injecting and going to super physiologic levels and doing crazy stuff by combining things that are normally opposite, growth hormone and insulin and testosterone, which I wouldn't recommend, yeah, you can see effects from that. But in a physiologic range, due to these short bumps, due to exercise or a supplement, probably not that big of a difference on that.
So from, as I said to you earlier on, from what I've just looked into so far and just what you've alluded to there now, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot with CBD regarding performance. Okay, a little bit there on sleep. So I suppose that kind of leads into the question, is the most of the benefit from recovery, is it for recovery that we're looking at?
Yeah, so in recovery, so what I tell people to do is, okay, how do you define recovery and what component, right? So I'd say the simplest thing to do to me is, okay, if I go to the gym Monday and I do, bodybuilding dude bra chest and arm day, right? Mm-hmm. And I do the tissue assassin model where I just try to, beat the crap out of them. And I could come back, let's say Friday, and do that again and have the same level of performance. Cool, that's a good benchmark, right? Hypothetically. Yeah. Now, if I do something to improve my recovery, and I don't have any fancy lab equipment, do that workout Monday, and I do my CBD for recovery or whatever it is, could I then do that session again Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday? Could I do it sooner? If I could do it sooner, my performance was the same or possibly better, whatever's going on in the black box, my recovery, I would say, is better. Right now, you can get into looking at HRV, you can get into looking at qualitative, quantitative measures. But for most people, I tell them just do some type of standardized baseline and then do that and see what a difference it makes. For direct data on CBD and recovery, there really isn't hardly any. My hypothesis, which is out there, is I think it may help with CNS recovery. And even CNS recovery is that's a whole nother rabbit hole of trying to even define what the hell that even is. But anecdotally, and I've done this too, if you talk to people who have a mega wave using a DC potential, if we assume DC potential is a marker for quote unquote CNS fatigue, with my little air quotes, that CBD appears to help that. And if we look at what I think CBD is probably best for, I would say it would be just neuronal brain health, neuroinflammation, things of that nature. So a guy I talked to who's like a top endocannabinoid researcher in the US, he did a conference at AHS that I was presenting at also. I did a talk on CBD. But I didn't know him. I just went up to him and asked him, I said, hey, like, what do you all the stuff about endocannabinoid system and CBD and everything else, like, what do you think is like the number one use for CBD? Or is there just no use for it at all? And he's like, no, it definitely, neuronal health standpoint, he said, is by far and away number one. And that's the same conclusion I came to also. I think small amount, now we don't know what exact dosing is, but I would say 18 to maybe even 20 milligrams of CBD in a mixed hemp oil, which means you have other small amounts of other active cannabinoids, right? Because there's over 100 different other cannabinoids beyond THC and CBD. There's possibly terpenes. There's all what the fancy name is, they call them chemovars. All these other different components that are in there also. I think some type of mixed preparation that is standardized for CBD, for neuronal health issue, possibly reduction if you get whacked in the head. That's what I would say is probably the number one use for it. And related to that, there's a very cool mouse study that prophylactically gave them CBD, I believe it was in a mixed hemp oil, and then they whacked them on the head. And so when you get whacked on the head, so if you potentially get a TBI, there's different types of TBI depending on how the injury hits and stuff like that. But the two main things that happen, like almost immediately, is you have a massive energy crisis because the neurons get all screwed up and their metabolism just gets screwed. So their main fuel, glucose, just gets effed. So you could use ketones, but even if you do a ketogenic diet, that's going to take a while to get high enough levels of ketones. Ketones may help with the neuroinflammation and serve as another energy source to provide neurons for energy. George Brooks's lab is looking at lactate infusions also possibly. So you've got a massive energy crisis. The other thing that can happen too is that your blood-brain barrier gets disrupted and it actually can open. And when it opens, all this stuff that is normally keeping out of the body floods up into your brain and just exacerbates all the inflammation that you have going on, therefore making all the metabolic issues even worse. So in the rat study, when they gave them high dose of CBD, I don't remember the dosage, and they whacked them on the head, they saw that the blood-brain barrier didn't open as much. So prophylactically, maybe CBD could be used to possibly restrict the amount of blood-brain opening, or maybe even keep it closed after some type of head trauma. Now, again, that's a rat study, and people are always like, oh, well, that's not a human study. It's done in fuzzy rats. It doesn't matter. I'm like, you're never going to see a randomized controlled trial that IRB is going to approve for that. Yeah. Right? Imagine, okay, let's get 50 humans in here. All right, half you bastards get CBD, the other half don't, and we're going to whack all of you on the head and give you a TBI. This is not going to happen, right? So I would say there's some good data on that. Another part was interesting on THC, they did a retrospective study because THC was considered illegal when they did the study. They looked at TBI induced from motor vehicle accidents. So they got admitted to the ER. When you get admitted to the ER for a motor vehicle accident, you automatically have a tox screen that's run, and that data is kept. So what they did is they went backwards and looked at, I think it was over 400 patients, and said, okay, do you have a tox screen for THC or not? And then they even looked at mortality. So how long did you live after your TBI? And those who had positive for THC actually had better mortality with the TBI than those who did not, which is super interesting. Again, retrospective study, all the standard caveats apply, but again, you're not going to see that study, done in a forward manner anyway. It's like, yeah, a bunch of you people go smoke and we'll, do some injury to you, and it's not going to happen. So,
has there been studies on creatine too in terms of being a preventative strategy for concussions?
Yeah. So the best study is from Canada. Don't quote me on this. I don't know if it's Tarnopolsky or not, but that was the one where they whacked him on the head. Creatine did help with that. There's some other mechanistic data showing that it helps with that. So Dr. Eric Rosson did a very cool talk at CISSN this past year, looking at all the different effects of creatine. And I talked to him afterwards about, can we try to get a study going by looking at creatine in terms of TBI outcomes and stuff like that. Because I do a lot of work with functional or clinical neurology here in the Minneapolis. So I do some exercise stuff, online programming after they come in for an intensive with the docs there. So there's some pretty good data right now to show that it should be beneficial. The very hard part is, like I said, even on MRS or some type of spectroscopy, we don't know how much you can saturate the brain with creatine. Yeah. And to get a direct measure, almost impossible, right? Who's going to biopsy part of their brain? Not going to happen. So you're left with some other type of imaging or some type of measurement. And that's the tricky part, right? And we're talking about much, much smaller levels than what we see in muscle. Muscle is easy, right? Give you a bunch of creatine, do a biopsy. We can kind of look to see how much is there. We could run, MRS or some type of spectroscopy, magnetic imaging. But with brain, it's a lot harder. But you could do it as just open label intervention trial, right? Okay, hey, yeah, we know you've got TBI. We'll say this type of TBI, and we'll give half of the people creatine, the other half we won't, and we'll try to look at outcomes. The hard part with that is that the treatment for TBI right now is I think the best treatment is probably very individual. Mm-hmm. So now you're dealing with different types of mechanism. You're dealing with another different type of intervention. But as a, kind of back of the envelope, start, you could see if there's any difference between those two outcomes possibly.
Yeah, kind of what's coming into my mind there, as you kind of said, you wouldn't get ethical approval to do some studies you'd like to do on humans. But I was just thinking, like, if you were brought in as a consultant or some part of the backroom staff with an NFL team or any high-level football team or any sport where there's high incidence of concussions, rugby would be one or two. Yep. You'd probably be like, listen, there's no harm in like doing these dosages of CBD and creatine just to see, like, and even though you wouldn't have a control group unless you said, right, some players will put on it, some we won't, but then it's kind of unethical. But I mean, like, if you just tracked maybe just scans of their brains, and then maybe compared it to teams who aren't doing it with their team for whatever reason, and just, I know it wouldn't be an exact,
totally
control group to an experimental group, but it might show something. Because I know from reading Dr. Karazian's work, the book he had, Why is My Brain Working, and looking into some of the stuff that Dr. Carrick has too, like, kind of got me thinking that if I was to ever get back coaching in a sport that had incidents of traumatic brain injuries, I think things that I would constantly look at would be gait and handwriting. As funny as that sounds, because one thing Karazian talks about in the book, he's like about your brain getting inflamed and, basically aging faster than it should, is like, how's your handwriting looking? Because it's just the motor control of that. And then gait too, like, if your gait is like coming more labored and if it's widening, and just simple things to see, like. And it kind of got me thinking that if you were kind of just taking in these things over the course of a season with your American football players, say, like, the guys who are more prone to getting head injuries, just kind of looking at a daily sort of, let me see you walk up and down the hallway. Okay, sign your name here every day you come in, just to see over the course of the season how that's going, maybe give you some indirect measure of their brain. So it just got me thinking about brain health. But just in terms of going back to CBD and creatine, it probably is one of these things where, like, can it help? Yes. Is it harmful? No. Would you possibly do it? Like, so, well, if you were brought in this is just a complete digression. Well, it's not a complete digression because we're staying on the topic.
It's on track.
Yeah, we're staying on the topic of CBD and creatine here. If you were brought in as a consultant, say we'll just say for this conversation, NFL team, and it was to do around concussions, what sort of procedures might you recommend or put in place?
So what I have told people is, I can tell you what I would do personally, right? And what I do with teams is like, hey, here's the literature on it. Here's the mechanisms. You guys have to decide if it's something you want to take on an individual level. But my recommendation that I do personally is high dose of fish oil. And I use a blood spot test that can look at whole blood levels and RBC, so red blood cell membrane content.
Why fish? Sorry, Mike. Why fish oil, Mike? Because in my mind, was that not thin blood? Like, if you were getting a head trauma, would that not, like, maybe increase some blood getting across the barrier if it opened up?
I think there's only 2 studies now that have looked at the effect of fish oil on bleeding risk. So one of the early ones, which I'm still trying to track down, if I remember right, it did statistically increase bleeding risk, but it was very, very mild.
Okay.
Right. And think about this. So the other thing I look at is how many people use fish oil, and how many case reports have you seen of, oh my God, we did surgery on this patient and they bled like a stuck pig. Oh, it was the fish oil. Like, you never see that. Or, like, I've rarely ever seen that. So I think the bleeding risk is probably overdone.
So would you be prescribing it more so for its anti-inflammatory effect?
Yes. Yeah, it'd be more for anti-inflammatory. There's some good retrospective. There's some other good data showing that fish oil just seems to be very protective. And if you go all the way back to even the cell membrane, right, we want the right amount of fatty acids to keep cell membranes nice and stable. You don't want, too much of this or too little of that. And what I found is that the dosing of fish oil can vary quite a bit. So I use a simple blood spot test to figure out where that's at. And then I also tell them to look at their cardiovascular risk. There's a study by like Alberts et al. From like 1991 and some other very good data showing that if you're very, very low in fish oil, right, so essential fatty acids, your risk of cardiovascular disease goes up dramatically. It's a pretty big factor. And again, what are the downsides, right? Maybe some bleeding risk. I mean, I would recommend people double down on fish oil before they go in for a procedure. Long term, if you just go batshit crazy, you could have some immune effects, so suppression of the immune system, possibly. But then you're talking like huge doses.
Yeah.
And I won't say who ran this N of 1 study, but he did 4 to 8 grams a day, I think, of EPA DHA for 6 or 8 weeks. And we had him do blood spot tests, and he'd saturated up to a particular level, and then it just kind of flatlined. So we don't know exactly what that high-end mechanics are, but my guess is at some point you just can't force anything more into the cell membrane of a healthy person. So I'd say fish oil, I'd say creatine, might probably higher doses, like 10 to 20 grams a day, which is higher. So we're trying to saturate brain levels. And then I would say CBD at a minimum 20-ish milligrams is probably the low end. We don't know the exact dosage. And I would do in mixed cannabinoids as an oil tincture. And another thing you can do to increase absorption of CBD, because the bioavailability is quite low, is hold it in your mouth for 30 to 60 seconds. That may increase the absorption because it's taking a different route. Most companies can't tell you that because that's considered possibly drug delivery, which can get them in trouble with the FDA. But I mean, there's still topical preparations, things like that are kind of considered a gray area. In terms of functional outcomes, I would have them, I think gait's probably pretty good. There's some stuff like very simple, like a Stroop test, which is looking more at cognition. You can run on your phone. That's affected by a bunch of other stuff too. And there's very good data. I know Dr. Carrick has presented on this with eye function.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, I would pair them with a clinical neurologist. They can do, VNG. They can do all sorts of, crazy eye movement measures. And I would just be looking at that. If I'm someone who I know I'm in a contact sport, for me personally, knowing what I know now, I would go in probably every couple months and just get a good baseline and see if that starts deteriorating, especially at the end of the season, because there's some pretty good data showing that eye function may be a two-way street, meaning looking at eye function may give us some early ideas about neurology, what's going on. And training eye function in very specific ways may actually reduce the risk of concussions, right? Because think about what's happening. If you're a running back in American football and you can just in a split second, even just move your head just the tiniest amount to even deflect part of a blow, that may mechanically make a huge difference to what may happen to your brain. Dr. Joe Clark and Dr. Carrick have done some very cool stuff with that, with the football team in Cincinnati, I believe, and they showed pretty dramatic decrease in concussion in American football players by doing some specific eye training.
Yeah, concussion is just, it really is some topic, isn't it? Because I suppose that, particularly over the last number of years, the brain has really come to the forefront in so many fields now that people are like, it really is just all about the brain, isn't it? We're just a slave to the brain, all our addictions to food, brain, all the sensory input to the brain. It's just like, so we got to look after that bad boy. But I suppose when that Will Smith movie came out, on the true story of that.
Yeah.
What was the doctor's name? Do you remember the doctor's actual name? His name's escaped me.
I'm blanking.
I'll put his name in the show notes.
I'll think of it. We can look it up.
I watched the actual documentary, but since that came to fruition, now the NHL are kind of having their thing now with concussions too. Yeah, it's just such a huge thing. Just before we wrap up on the CBD, Mike, I've heard you talk about the different routes it can be ingested. So you have smoking, vapor, you can eat it too, and then there's the transdermal methods. Is there one particular one that's shown to be more effective?
It's all across the board. For some, I would say pain stuff, there's some data showing that Transdermal in animals may be useful. So I've talked to a fair amount of orthopedic surgeons, and I did this. My mom won't listen to this, but I did this test on my mom too. She had so hip pain, so we gave her some CBD with menthol just in a balm, and seemed to help her hip pain when nothing else really seemed to help. So transdermal, I think on pain, again, mostly animal studies right now. We may not really see that study done in humans, because if it is shown to be very effective, now you have direct data showing that, hey, this over-the-counter supplement does alter pain, and that may not be taken too kindly by the FDA, because that may be considered a drug. I would not expect a bunch of companies to sponsor that anytime soon, although it'd be super interesting to know. We probably should know. So vaping is a possible way. So you can change vape temperature. So temperature will affect how different chemicals come off, because they have different boiling points. And in my opinion, if that's the route you're going to do, it's legal in your state. Some of the oils may or may not be the best, right? If I was going to use an oil, I would do a lot of research into the company that's manufacturing that oil, right? What else is in it? How do you manufacture it? What else did you stick in there? Because you don't really know by looking at it. Yeah. There's other pens that can vaporize just the flower or the dried herb itself. That would be my preferential way, because then I can control what's actually going in. And on those, you can adjust the temperature. So if you want more of like the different terpenes from it, the temperature is actually quite low. However, if you want to distinguish between THC and CBD, right? So my initial thought was, can we adjust the vape temperature just to get CBD and not much THC, right? Because some people want the beneficial effects of that. They don't want to, the effects of THC, the psychoactive part. And unfortunately, probably not, right? The temperature of those two are super close together. So to get that, you would need to start with a material that has very high CBD and very low THC. And there are becoming more of those now in different states where it's legal, but there's not a ton. There's becoming a lot more every day. Like 3 years ago, it was very, very hard to find. But that would be the route you'd have to go with that.
Bennett Omalu, that was his name.
Oh, okay, yes. Thank you for looking that up.
Come here. What are terpenes?
So terpenes are these other compounds that are present in all different types of food, right? So limonol is one that's actually found in lemons, has a very aromatic lemon flavor to it, right? So if you smell cannabis, you're like, oh, smells like diesel fuel. Smells like lemons. Smells like wet dog, right? Whatever. All those different profiles are primarily from the terpenes themselves.
Okay.
And just like in other foods, those terpenes may have specific pain effects. They may have different inflammation effects. They may interact with your nervous system different. So like limonol is supposedly more uplifting. Some essential oil companies use that, which data on that's pretty mixed. But what's cool now is a lot of shops are going to an actual chemical profile of what's in there. So here's the THC amount, here's the CBD amount, here's the main terpenes that are found. Because the old thing of, oh, well, this is a sativa, and this is, this type, or this is, a hybrid, or this is just an indica. It's pretty much all BS. In order for that to be true, right? So if you're just like, okay, I want 100% sativa, and I want to take this to the lab, and in lab, I want you to show me that this is 100% sativa. Can they, put it through an HPLC? Could they do all sorts of fancy testing? Absolutely. The downside you're left with, though, well, what is 100% sativa, right? I need to compare it to 100% known sample so I can see what the differences are to say, oh, this is 80%. And they don't have that known sample because it's been so crossbred literally since like the beginning of time. No one can figure it out. Even the word sativa, so this is which a weird nerd I am. So I'm like, where did that come from? Like, how did this happen? Right? And you look at the sativa-y type plants, they tend to grow very tall and they tend to be a little bit more spaced out. So the rumor was, oh, well, that's super uplifting because the plants grow super tall and have this different leaf structure. And, indica plants in general, these shorter, kind of squatty, bushy looking things. Oh, that tones you out, man, and keeps it closer to the ground because it's a tree, the shrub thing is closer to the ground. And that's probably all made up. However, there may be enough truth in there where that's kind of lived over like hundreds of years. Because different terpenes are associated with different hybrids of different types of plants. And so my guess is it's probably more the terpenes that are kind of coming along for the ride in these different plants that do tend to have very different physiologic effects. So are there different physiologic effects? Absolutely. Is it as simple as saying, oh, this is a hybrid, or this is a sativa, or this is an indica? Yeah, it's probably pushing it. And then even the word sativa, as best I can tell, came from 1543 by a guy named David Fuchs, Fuchs. And it was coined for cannabis that was cultivated. Indica was probably named a little bit later. But again, everything now is a complete hybrid.
Yeah, like traditionally was a sativa and indica, like one is more upregulating and one is more downregulating. You can tell me which one is which. Which
sativa is supposed to be more upregulating. Indica is more downregulating. And you will definitely feel different effects. But again, you go back to, okay, so what temperature was it at? Are you getting a lot of THC and terpenes? Are you getting only terpenes? CBD does have a little bit of modulation effect of THC. The data on that is kind of mixed, but it probably does. So if you have something that has a high amount of CBD also, that's going to affect it. The percentage of THC will also affect that also. And then to make it even more complicated, if you take an edible, which is THC, right? So if you go back to the actual plant itself, so you go back to cannabis and you're like, all right, I found this cannabis field. I'm going to be like Mr. Rabbit and I'm just going to eat all this cannabis and just get really high and pass out in the field. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're like, well, wait a minute. There's like THC in it. THC itself has to go through a process, so does CBD, called decarboxylation. If you put it in like paper and you hit it with heat, it automatically will decarboxylate due to heat. But you got to chemically convert it, right? If I put it in something and I vape it, the temperature will decarboxylate it at that point. If I need to make an oil or an edible preparation, I have to apply some type of temperature or pressure or critical CO2 extraction to decarboxylate the raw material to get the compounds that I want. Now, if you take THC as an edible, the first thing that happens is the liver changes it to 11-hydroxy-THC, which for all practical purposes may as well be a completely different chemical. So if you're comparing something that's smoked versus ingested as an edible, in my opinion, they're two completely different chemicals altogether.
Wow.
And the edibles are very weird pharmacokinetics. They can be very, very long.
Yeah.
Meaning it could be 30, 60, 90. There's even 120 minutes or longer in the literature. Did you have something to eat? That will affect it. Obviously, the dose will affect it. And then the onset of it is like this weird, super, super slow, and then it gets really exponential. And so this leads to all sorts of very interesting stories with people. So if you get bored sometime at a party, just ask people if they've ever done an edible and what their first experience was, and you usually get like a few pretty good stories out of people. And it's like the same every single time. It's like, oh man, we went to Colorado, we never did it before, and so we went to the weed shop and we bought someone, and it was, I don't know what it was, and we took one and we waited around and like nothing happened, so we did another one and then like nothing happened, and then we thought maybe we should try a third one. And then like 20 minutes later, I didn't even know where I was. And because now you're combining all those onsets, at the same time. A buddy of mine who will remain nameless was in Amsterdam. He's like, yeah, I did that. And like, nothing happened. So I went to bed. He's like, I woke up 2 hours later and had to use the bathroom. And he's like, oh my God, I was like so stoned. I could barely even get to the bathroom. So. Yeah, completely different drug.
I just woke up and I was in Dallas all of a sudden. What?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Come here, just a little, and I know we'll finish up here soon.
No, we're good. I'm good till 10:30. So we're
good. Brilliant. Just that's great, because then we might be able to touch on HRV. Just with the creatine dosage, you were saying 10 to 20 grams. Was there any issues with GI discomfort? Because I just know personally, if I was to take about 20 grams, I think I'd be on the pot. Like,
so if you look at the neurology studies, Tarnopolsky has done some of these, looking at like Huntington's disease, Parkinson's, things of that nature. The data on creatine in those diseases is pretty mixed. Some of it's really good, some of it's not so good, meaning it just didn't affect the outcomes as much as we thought. But they said that he was doing a study, I believe, on Parkinson's, and they were using a 20 gram dose, I think split out twice or up to 4 times a day. He said, yeah, you do see some GI issues. If you see that, just, start cutting the dose in half and just spread it out over the course of a day. There's some very old stuff from Roger Harris showing that may actually increase creatine absorption. Again, does it make any difference? We don't know. But the side effects were way less than the drugs they were comparing it to. He said, surprisingly, even in more elderly people, like the amount of people who had GI distress, he said, was very low. It was actually much lower than he thought it was going to be. Okay. So yeah, definitely happens, but it appears to be lower than what I would have thought. I would have thought, 2 doses of 10 grams each, you're going to have all sorts of GI distress. And we generally don't see that, although it definitely can happen.
Would you just take it anyway? Like just for the potential neurological benefits? Because I suppose one thing that I've been kind of, meditating on, when I use the word meditate, I just mean that I think about, I do a lot of my thinking as I walk, so I call that meditation. But something I have been thinking about meditating more about, and even just having more discussions with other people, say like with James Fitzgerald here at OPEX as well.
Yeah.
Is that, listen, no matter what, until I can't anymore, I'll always take part in some type of physical endeavor, because I just love my body, move my body. But, I have been meditating more on cognitive performance, making sure that my brain, what bad English.
Me brain.
That was real Irish. My brain. My brain. And then if there's any like sort of real esoteric teachers, it's just like, you're not your body anyway.
Yeah.
But sorry. Again, I'm being long-winded. I need to get better at this. The point I'm getting to is that I suppose I've been putting more thought and focus on cognitive performance and longevity for my brain and cognitive health going forward, and just thinking about how to maximize that. Even I'm starting to think about my nutrition, because we know that the certain fuels that you'd need for more physical endeavors, they actually could be pretty detrimental for long-term cognitive health. If you were maybe thinking about like some of the dietary protocols and energy intakes that are needed to fuel some sports, and then say, okay, let's say now the goal was long-term cognitive health, that dietary strategy probably is not the best for long-term cognitive health of your brain, whereas, you probably do need that to fuel the muscles to do a specific sport endeavor you're trying to do. Anyway, so long way of saying this, just in terms of long-term cognitive health, if we were just saying, right, I just want to live to be as long as possible, I'm still going to look after my body physically in terms of its mobility and strength and power and speed capabilities, but not to the extent where I'm doing it for performance, and I want to focus a little more on cognitive health. What are some strategies there? Like, so would creatine be one? What would this was? Anyway, I was going to say other things. Well, let you answer now.
Yeah. Again, my bias, I'd say I take creatine most days, 5 to 10 grams a day. I will cycle up higher if I'm going to go on a kiteboarding trip. And then I'll also have weeks where, to be perfectly honest, I just forget. I don't take it. So I think I kind of have somewhat of a cyclic approach, which is probably better. We don't have any direct data on that. Last time I checked, there was, 400, I think, and 53 studies in PubMed on creatine monohydrate alone. It's been more studied than anything.
It's researched a bit.
Yeah, we really haven't seen any negative effects. The GI upset is probably the only one. Weight gain of a couple pounds, which you could argue is a benefit, not a side effect, depending on your sport. Yeah, hydration. All the myths we thought about creatine just showed not to be true. It doesn't dehydrate you. There's no negative, So I would say I feel pretty safe that creatine is in that dosage is going to be fine.
But the majority of those studies, though, are more so for sport and performance, or say, strength and power outputs, more so than, say, neurological ones, aren't they?
Yeah. So the neurologic ones, I just pulled a bunch of data on that for like Parkinson's and ALS and other neurologic diseases. And It was kind of mixed. Like the outcome trials were not as positive as what I would have hoped for if you would have asked me 5 years ago. But again, you didn't see a lot of negatives. And we have to remember that that's trying to treat an existing pathology already.
Yeah.
That's different than someone who's, I just want to stay healthier, right? The amount of effect and sort of stimulus you need to treat a pathology is going to be quite different than keeping someone healthy. Other things I think that might be useful, like I mentioned, fish oil. There's some data on acetyl L-carnitine, has some okay data on that. So as a full disclosure, I've formulated for some energy and nootropics for companies in the past. The other one too is acetylcholine, or CDP. You can look up a researcher by the name of Renshaw. He's got pretty impressive data on acetylcholine in cognitive function in elderly people.
Yeah.
And again, don't seem to see a lot of negative effects with that either.
I think a big thing too, this was really brought to my awareness by Brian Walsh. And like one of his whole things, or a big thing I took away from him, he's like, probably one of the best things anyone can do for the long-term health is just manage their blood sugar. Like
blood sugar management is
like
a huge thing, especially
like
reducing glycemic variability.
Yeah, exactly. Like just to manage like your blood sugar. And it's so funny because last year I put a glucometer on me. Now it was the Free Libra, which I know apparently
I've used that.
Yeah, but apparently it isn't as reliable as the Dexcom. But the Dexcom is just so much more expensive.
Yeah, the Dexcom's like thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So, but what I really learned from that was it really brought to my awareness what previous, and even at the time when I had the continuous glucose monitor on, it really brought to my awareness what subjective feelings were like, because I'd got the feelings I'd gotten previously, like, just like they're kind of like that fuzziness around the back of your eyes and you're just a little bit tired or whatever. And you just think, geez, I'm a bit tired. And then, like, as I start tracking my blood sugar over a few weeks, I was like, oh, this is what low blood sugar is. This is actually, so now I know that feeling, like, because I don't have the monitor on at the moment, like, but it just made me realize, oh, this is when my sugar's low. Oh, this is what it feels like when it's high. And like, I know, like, and I can also match behaviors to it. So I know, like, what really was a big, has massive impacts on my blood sugar is my meal size. Like, if I have a big ass meal, like, and I wake up the next morning and I have that feeling behind my eyes where I'm fuzzy, I'm like, that's because I ate too much last night before I went to bed. Like, whereas, kind of maybe more like the light exposure stuff, like, I'm very good about my light exposure, but I find that, let's say there might be a night where I just had to be out a little bit later and I didn't have a massive meal, say a few hours before bed, I find it wasn't as detrimental, or didn't screw up my blood sugar as much. Just certain things like that. It just made me dial into that though. But just again, going back to long-term health and brain health too, that blood sugar regulation is probably huge, which led me into a question I want to ask you then, was like, what about this idea of, cyclic fasting or even cyclic keto, going into, I don't want to say diet, but going into ketosis more, maybe just to use different fuel substrates for the brain. Is there anything on that, like, in terms of cognitive performance?
I haven't seen anything directly on that. Brandon Egan, right, who's over in Ireland there, and
myself and Brendan are like not best mates, but I meet Brendan every month. Like, he's kind of like,
oh, nice,
he's
awesome dude.
Yeah.
Tell him I said hi. I need to follow up with him again, but he's got lots of super cool research. I believe it was him and Don D'Agostino that did a paper on ketones and cognitive function during exhaustive exercise. Don't quote me on that, but there's some data in that realm, right? Which I think if I were to guess on ketones, especially you get into ketone salts and supplements, things like that, I do think long-term cognitive benefit, especially during a fatiguing sport, I think that may pan out to be a good use of them. For general health, I would argue from a metabolic flexibility standpoint, for health reasons, going in and out of ketosis, maybe for 2 to 4 weeks a year, from a pure health standpoint, I could make an argument that may be useful. Me personally, I will do more fasting instead, just because that fits my lifestyle and my physical goals and that kind of stuff. But I think you could make an argument for that. Above that, I would still put like glycemic regulation, glucose control, how do you feel, sleep, and then for cognitive function that people forget, aerobic training, especially in the strength world. People forget that aerobic training has massive benefits for cognitive function John Radley's book, which is older now, called Spark. Lots of super cool data in there, and there's even a lot of newer data that still supports that with hippocampal volume and all sorts of stuff.
Do you know another thing too? And this is going to like sound like such a duh, but oxygen. You know, going back to Karazian's book, and then I just recently finished Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McKeown.
Yeah,
like, and
cool.
You know, like so many of us are such chronic mouth breathers.
Oh yeah, I was.
And we oversaturate ourselves with oxygen. And you know, McKeown brings to awareness a really good point in his book. He's like, if you look at the Bohr effect, the Bohr effect says if there's already too much oxygen in your system, hemoglobin won't let go of oxygen to your tissues. So he's like, you're going to actually have low levels of O2 in the actual tissues, and you're actually going to start feeling tired. And going to Karazian's book, like Karazian said, there's three main things your brain always needs. It needs some amount of glucose, it needs stimulation, and it absolutely needs oxygen. And in Karazian's book, he says that when he has patients, he goes to them, take off your shoes and socks. And they're like, what the hell? You know, because these be people going to him with like thyroid issues and brain issues and all that. And he's like, show me, take off your shoes and socks.
Capillary function.
He wants to see if they've got fungal nail growth. And he's like, you got bad blood circulation. And he's like, if you're not getting blood down to your toes, you're not getting blood up to your brain. So
interesting.
And so his whole thing is like oxygen, stimulation, and glucose are the big things your brain needs. So it just with his work, and then with Patrick's work, Patrick McKeown's work, the idea that, you know, that like actually oxidation, getting, you know, oxidizing or getting tissue oxidization, like oxidizing your tissues is a really important thing. And although most of us are breathing, it's kind of like we're breathing just enough to survive, but we're not breathing enough to actually thrive to our maximum potential, because our breathing, you know, kinetics are terrible, because usually we're using our fucking mouth rather than nasal breathing than we should be using and stuff like that. And then we just have poor breathing habits. But that's just another thing too, oxygen, you know. So yeah, if I was to probably take a summary there, like in terms of, you know, just cognitive health, long-term health, blood sugar regulation is just a huge one. And as you know, you know, metabolic flexibility is a big part in that, to be able to switch from one to the other and not have it to disturb your blood sugar regulation management. And then oxygen, and then obviously just keeping your brain busy, stimulating, doing new things all the time, learning new skills.
Yeah, and people forget that. I think the learning new skills part is super beneficial. I mean, the more I learn about how the vestibular system is wired into proprioception, which is wired into the eyes, which is wired into neuronal development. Like, I mean, for me, like I've been trying to learn how to foil board, which has been super fun, but I've been kicking the crap out of myself for 2 years working on that, kind of off and on. And it's just a very weird balance, you know, type, lots of proprioceptive interaction, lots of visual input, lots of vestibular input, you know, and it's fun, right? People forget that those things should be some type of recreation, should be fun. Like with clients, I get super worried if like the only thing they ever do is they're like CrossFit, you know, sagittal monster, and they're in their mid 40s and they're like, I want to be super healthy. I'm like, okay, you got a, you know, pretty big engine, but like, do you even play tennis? Do you do any recreation? Like, do you just chill out once in a while? No. Okay, there's probably a few things we should look at. Look at.
Yeah, big time. Listen, you've only 7 minutes there, and I don't think 7 minutes is going to do justice for HRV. So probably just wrap up with a few little questions for you, and then also tell the listeners where they can find out more about you. And also, you have a recent course just launched.
Yeah.
So yeah, just before I get into the last few questions, I'm just going to ask you, like, you know, what are you reading at the moment, and then just a few little other things, like little quick fire ones. But before I do that, tell people where they can find out more about you, and also tell them about the Flex Diet course.
Yeah, so the main site is just miketnelson.com, MIKETNELSON.com. At the very top of the site there'll be a little banner where they can get on the newsletter. So most of the content I put out now is through the newsletter. So probably 80-90% of the content is there. Obviously a bunch of articles, a bunch of other stuff, you know, different services I do. So the main one I'm doing right now is the Flex Diet certification. You just go to FlexDiet, FLEXDIET.com. And so what I basically did is it's mostly on nutrition and recovery. And I said, okay, what are like the top 8 interventions you could do, right? So how much protein do you need, carbohydrates, fat, fasting, NEAT, exercise, sleep, micronutrition. And then how do you rank those, right? So like what's number 1 and what's number 8 in terms of you as a trainer getting their clients to actually do the thing, right? Because sleep is super cool. And I love Dan Party's stuff. I know he's been on here. Awesome guy.
Yeah.
But if clients if the trainer goes to their client and says, I want you to go to bed 2 hours earlier tonight, Just let me know how that conversation's going to go. Client's going to be like, hey, you're telling me I need the 2 hours. We finally put the kid to bed. I get to chill out and relax with my wife and watch Netflix. And you're telling me I can't do that anymore? Screw you. This is a horrible idea, right? So again, it doesn't mean that sleep does not have massive physiologic impacts, because it does. But the psychology of that conversation, I find, tends to be weighted lower once you have more rapport and things of that nature. So how do you organize those? And then I just took, for each intervention, a 1 hour thing, and said, okay, everything you need to know as a trainer about protein to a pretty high level, condensed it into 1 hour. And then there's 5 interactions, or I should say action steps for each one. So it's very much, you get some education, you learn about metabolic flexibility, flexible dieting as a big picture. And then we've got all sorts of cool, interviews from Stu Phillips, Jose Antonio, Dr. Dan Party, Eric Helms,
Sweet.
Like 12 different people. If they want to go super in depth into Stu talking about, leucine, and Dan talking about light regulation in the back of the eyeball and stuff like that. So
sounds great. Yeah, sounds amazing. So that'll be all linked up in the show notes. So what is the exact URL for? Is it Flex Diet?
Yep, it's just flexdiet.com.
Great. Yeah, that's a great URL to get. All right, wrap it up.
That was expensive, Mike. URL.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah.
There was someone sent me that had the same name, and they tried to get the URL. It's not coming to my mind right now, but they asked the person, could they get it? Oh, I think it was Brett Bartholomew, I think. He tried, and there was another Brett Bartholomew, and like he was like, your man wanted scandalous money, so I think he just got Arctic coaching or something like that. But something along those lines. But just last 3 questions for you. First one is, what are you currently reading, and what is your actual top reading recommendation? So what are you currently reading? And then if you had to give one book away, what would you give away?
Yeah, so a couple. I'm just reading right now, The Cannabis, A History. That's not too bad. I'm also reading a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference. He was the FBI negotiator for hostage crisis.
Wow.
And so from a communication standpoint, like him and Jim Camp stuff, I look at a lot, because I'm like, okay, you're in a situation where you have to win. You're in a situation where you know the outcome, good or bad. And this is what you do for a profession. I think Chris Voss did it for like 20 years. I'm like, you probably know a lot about communication, right? So you took a wicked problem and made it a kind problem and just iterated the crap out of that. So that one's been pretty good. And then my favorite book that I finished so far this year has been Range by David Epstein. That book was phenomenal. So really
a lot of people recommend it. I haven't read it now, but a lot of people recommend it. I've heard him on podcasts talking about the subjects, but I suppose it's because like so many of, I was gonna say us, who is it's like as their policy, us versus them in the policy. But like so many professionals within sort of like the human performance realm, whether it's strength and conditioning or whether it's rehabilitation or nutrition or mindset, whatever, collectively just as a profession in the human performance fields, like I think that we take such pride in being generalists. That's probably why we love that book so much. Even though I haven't read it, but I've heard him speak about it. He's like, that's why generalists kick the shit out of specialists.
Yeah, and I know that's partially it's feeding into my own self-biasy is why.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's feeding into our biases. That's exactly what I mean,
yeah. And my quick thing on that too is that we have to be, there's a quote from Tom Myers is like, when you combine 2 things, make sure you just don't end up making dishwater, right? Some of us may not be at the level of being a gourmet chef where you can combine stuff together. So I have my own little cutoffs. Like if I do soft tissue work, does someone actually pay me to only do soft tissue work? And am I only known for that? And do they pay me like at the top percentage of what the market will bear? And then beyond that, can I actually teach for that? So I teach for obviously RPR, reflexive performance reset, stuff like that. So I have my own little internal things.
Just did level 1, so I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, sweet. Awesome.
The online. Just done it. Last 2 for you. This one could be a podcast in itself. So if you feel that this needs more time, we can pass on to my last one. But I just love asking people this question. And we spoke about this before we kind of hopped online. How do you learn?
Oof.
What's your
Maybe an own podcast of itself, but I would say super quick. Nobody taught me any of this stuff. Like I did the hard knocks of just trying a bunch of shit that didn't work at all. So what I do is I'll take something I'm interested in. I have a dedicated time to just read it through once. I don't consider that learning. That's just reading.
Okay.
If it's something I really want to learn, meaning I want the memory recite at any point in time. So I haven't told anyone this, but my goal for next year is to do an entire presentation using only a whiteboard, including at least 20 references, and have all the references, the authors, everything about all of those studies memorized. And ideally, I'd like to get to the point where most of the stuff I do is on that format only, even with incoming questions that I may not know. And obviously, there's going to be stuff that I'm not going to know and people are going to stump you, and that's fine. But real quickly to do that, I'll then go back through. So I'm doing a cell metabolism book right now. I'll write out things I think are important in colors. Then I'll go back and I'll quiz myself on that. I'll then reread my notes at different points during the day. I'll do that on different days. I'll then do that in different locations. And then I'll actually make flashcards from that I will let different amounts of time go by and quiz myself in different locations. Yeah. So you think about the neuronal process. What am I doing? I'm purposely hyper associating that to as many different things as I possibly can in order to increase the chance that I'm going to retain it.
That's why G-coupled protein receptors run your mindset earlier on.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because I was telling you before I hopped online, like I'm doing a lot of physiology and I'm just actually on the cell chapter. So
nice.
Obviously like the chapter 1 in physiology book is just like gives you like, what is anatomy, what is physiology, what is the levels of organization of the body, what is homeostasis, what are feedback systems, and then it goes into the chemical level about the atoms and then chemical reactions and whatnot, and then it gets into like now the next level is the cells, and then the next level is the tissues, and then it gets into the organ systems. Tegumentary is the first one, and then it gets into the bones and skeleton. But just getting into the cells, like I'm literally just yesterday just reading about all the different membrane proteins, so like ion channels, carriers, transporters, enzymes, so receptor and all that, linkers and cell identity markers. See, it's all there. But no, that's great stuff. Final one for you. And then you got to get back to taking over the world.
Yeah, I got an NSDA conference, so yeah.
If I was to take you for dinner, and you could take 5 people to dinner, dead or alive, who would you bring to that dinner and why?
Ooh, I may end up saying the same people I said last time, but I don't remember exactly who I said last time.
Yeah, I was wondering if I did, because sometimes I don't ask you.
Yeah, I know you asked me, but so I would say obviously family would already be there, so we don't have to worry about them. So my wife,
they're already there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We're good.
Jody's coming.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me to make it interesting, I would go with Joe Rogan, Henry Rollins. I'd throw in Louis Simmons, Jesus, and Teddy Roosevelt.
That's gas. Imagine Louis Simmons and Teddy Roosevelt. We won't get, and Joe Rogan wouldn't get a fucking word in. Jesus,
I know.
Jesus just.
And I would just sit there and just watch.
You could just see like Louis with Jesus. Like, you gotta go sit back.
More testosterone. What's wrong with you?
That's absolutely gas. Brilliant. Listen, Mike, I'll say a quick goodbye to offline. That was brilliant, but I'm gonna get you back on to talk about HRV. But
really, for sure, man.
Yeah, really appreciate you talking about CBD and enlightening me and educated me as well, and I'm sure no doubt the listeners got something out of this too. But I'll have everything linked up in the show notes. I'll definitely 100% link up your website and about the Flex Diet course.
Awesome, thank you, sir.
And I'll link that video presentation you did for Renaissance Periodization, which is all about CBD, which I just watched earlier on.
Oh, cool, awesome.
I think that'd be really good too for the listeners to have. But so, guys, listen, Mike T. Nelson, absolute legend. Just a brain full of knowledge and such a super cool dude, great human being. And I just want to say once again, thanks so much, Mike. You're a top-class human being. I appreciate everything you're doing in the world.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me back on here and all the stuff you're doing. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. All right, for all the listeners, until next time, peace.